So good afternoon, everybody. Barry, if you're in the list and I can't see you, please pop up, please. I'm losing track of people's screens on the side. But welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We know it's a very busy time in PNG, so thank you for making time to join. My name is Stephanie and I'm an epidemiologist here at Hunter New England Health, and I'm also one of the faculty in the advanced FETPNG program. We're really pleased to be able to meet with you all today. We understand that this is a time of lots of new things and lots of information about COVID and the vaccine in particular, and so we're very pleased to be able to provide an opportunity for people to ask questions and have their questions answered, hopefully. So we look forward to being able to do that for you today. I can see a hand being raised by Helen. Hello, Helen, welcome. So just a note to everyone, as Tony's just popped in the chat there, we will be recording this session today for people who are unable to access for internet or other reasons, other meetings. So if you do not wish for your camera to be included on the recording, I suggest that you turn your camera off now. If everyone could please put themselves on mute so that we can clearly hear the people who are speaking, that would be fantastic. What we will do is that we will have Professor David Durkheim speak firstly to provide an overview of the COVID-19 vaccine. Then we will have Martha Pogo from National Department of Health from the EPI program. She'll be providing an overview of the rollout of the vaccine in Papua New Guinea. Then we'll have some time answering some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time through the online survey that many of you submitted. And then we'll have a bit of open question time at the end if time allows us to. So firstly, I'd like to ask Dr. David Durkheim to present. David is the Director of Public Health here at Hunter New England. He's a Professor of Public Health Medicine and long interest and much experience in the Pacific. So thank you so much, David, for your time today.
Thank you, Steph, and it's really lovely to be with all of you. And as we start off on the journey talking about vaccines, this has been an extraordinary 12 months across the world. As you all know, there have been over 125 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, and sadly, more than nearly 3 million deaths that have been recorded. And we know that that's an underestimate. And we also note the surge in cases in Papua New Guinea with over 4,000 confirmed cases. So we know you're going tough at the moment, and we all realize around the world that the only way out of this, and so it's great to be able to talk to you about what we know about the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. I've been very fortunate to be part of the World Health Organization SAGE working group on COVID-19 vaccines. And so the very first trial data that came out from AstraZeneca, I must admit, got me very excited a number of months ago. We'll try and cover some of the broad information, and then in the question time, we'll try and answer some of the specific questions. So, is it going to misbehave? May not be paging down. Let's just see. Oh, there we go. So this is a little graphic on your left-hand side of what the virus looks like. The virus needs cells to live in. It's not like a bacteria that can survive in the environment. And it's actually got quite an interesting structure, which I won't go through in detail, but the most important thing to note is those little pink spikes. Those are the spikes that allow the virus to hook onto key receptors in many of our organs, particularly at the beginning in our nose, throat, and lungs, but it allows the virus to invade the cells of our body. And in the cells of our body, the virus then can actually multiply and then escape and can infect very rapidly other cells, which causes the catastrophic infection. Now, the key thing about those spikes is that there's a little bit of genetic material that codes for those spikes. And that's going to be the key focus of all of the vaccines that are currently being made. So the spike protein is what the vaccines are targeting, because if we can prime our wonderful God-given immune systems so that they recognize the virus when it first tries to invade, then we can actually eradicate the virus, patients and death. So we basically are priming our immune systems so that they recognize the spike, which is so critical for the virus to actually cause severe infection. Now, what we do, this particular vaccine acts as a little bit of a carrier. So what that is used is something called an adenovirus. It's a cold virus. We all have had adenovirus infections. They look like the common cold most of the time. And chimpanzees also get adenovirus infections. And this is a chimpanzee adenovirus that is used just as a carrier to take that little bit of genetic material, the little red that you see there, that has been harvested from the virus, and it is spliced into the chimpanzee cold virus or adenovirus, and that is the prime way that the vaccine works. It then carries it in to our cells, and that little bit of DNA, that little bit of genetic code actually codes for little spikes on the top of our cells, and then our cell mechanism kills the virus. So the virus doesn't stick around in the body. That adenovirus gets destroyed, but what it's done is it's allowed little spikes on the cell surface where the vaccine's been actually administered, which then primes our immune system. Now, the good news as well about that virus is that they've actually modified it so that it cannot divide. So it's what we call a non-replicating virus. It can't divide, it can't spread. All it's doing is delivering that genetic code to make the spikes. And then our immune system does the rest. We prime both the B cells, the antibodies, and so we have a reserve of antibodies that are ready to go, and we prime our T cells, which are then ready for the virus and can neutralize it as well. So it's very important to note that that little bit of genetic code never gets into our nucleus. It never gets into our DNA. It can't modify our DNA. It's actually in the cell cytoplasm. It's read by little ribosomes in the cell cytoplasm, and they code for the little spikes on the surface of the cells. And we don't need it all over the body. You just need it in one spot, which is at the injection site, and that does the job. Now, the vaccines have been produced wonderfully quickly, and that's fantastic. But no shortcuts have been taken. What has basically happened is every step that normally takes place, required by regulators, has taken place, but they've taken place parallel to each other. So instead of having a long, drawn-out 10-year process, which is the normal time that it takes for a vaccine to be produced, the animal studies, the phase 1 studies, the phase 2 and the 3 studies have all overlapped, which has meant amazingly that we've been able to constrict the time frame into 12 months, which is amazing. And we haven't compromised on the safety review. That's very important. And I'll show you the number of regulators, credible regulators around the world in a moment, that have actually reviewed the safety of the vaccine to make sure that it doesn't pose any risk to us. As I said, the little carrier virus, the little chimpanzee cold virus that carries the genetic material, is destroyed in our cells. It doesn't stick around. So that's what this generally looks like. This is the AstraZeneca vaccine. You get it in 2 different doses, a 5 ml dose, which is 10 doses, or a 4 ml little vial, which is 8 doses. The reason Oxford is named there is Oxford University did the first work on this vaccine. And the interesting thing is they don't use the same technique to produce an Ebola virus vaccine which has saved many, many, many lives in Africa. So it's a well-tried technique, not one that we normally use in our childhood program, but it has been used very effectively to counter another very serious disease in Africa. Now, the trials, the AstraZeneca trials, the Oxford trials, were done around the world. I haven't even put the United States on here because they've just finished their trials there, but you can see it's been done in various different population groups right across the world, a number of study sites in Africa, some in South America, and the one in England specifically tried to enroll people from very many different ethnic backgrounds, just to make sure that people were well represented, that this wasn't just about Caucasian Europeans, this was about all population groups. And that gives me a lot of reassurance that it'll work just as well in everybody. These are all of the regulators, including our TGA in Australia. Now, I know the way the TGA works, and it is absolutely ruthlessly careful in the way it reviews safety and effectiveness data, but it's not the only one. In Europe, 3 regulators, including, I believe, probably the best regulator in the world, the European Medicine Authority, the EMA, in North America, Central America, South America, Africa, all around the world, multiple regulators has carefully looked at the effectiveness and safety data and said, this is a safe and effective vaccine. It should be used to protect people from COVID and to save lives. The key thing is that the time between doses makes a big difference. So if one only gives the second dose within 6 weeks, the protective level is less than it is with 12 weeks. So 3 months difference between the doses is the perfect time frame. Now, you can use it more quickly. You might compromise quite a bit on people that will actually develop some symptoms, but it's probably still going to protect most people from dying. But if you give them 12-month interval, the experience from around the world is it's about 100% effective in preventing deaths, but it doesn't, it's like all other vaccines. It's not completely effective. Even measles, my favorite vaccine, measles, if you only have 1 dose, about 95% of people are protected against disease. It protects you against severe disease, but you might still get a mild measles. If you have 2 doses, 99% of people are protected, but 1 in every 100 isn't fully protected, but it protects you from severe disease. And that's what this vaccine appears to do. Now, some people talk about the fact that a lot of people get a sore arm, and up to 30% of people, 1 in 3, might even feel a bit fluey on the 2nd and the 3rd day after the vaccine. And we can look at more detailed data if you want to look at the particular side effects. But that is actually because our immune system is responding. So it means that there's a strong cell response if you get a red sore spot. And if the immune system itself is priming, sometimes one can feel a little bit fluey as well. And we see that that fades very rapidly. It's only present for normally in most people for 2 days, 1 or 2 days. So probably those are the introductory remarks I wanted to make, Steph, and I'll hand over back to you.
Thanks, Dave. That was fantastic. I'd like to invite Ms. Martha Pogo. Where is she? She's the Acting Director of EPI at the National Department of Health in Papua New Guinea at the moment. So a very busy woman, so extremely grateful for your time, Martha. I'm just going to share my screen for your presentation. How does that look, Martha? Is that right?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. I'm connecting from my phone here and it's playing up. So when it's on now, I have to really run quickly before anything else happens. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can, Martha. Thank you.
Okay. I have only 5 minutes and the number of slides is 15. So obviously I will be basically skipping some of the slides. So that's the National Department of Health COVID-19 Vaccine Deployment Plan update as of the 22nd of March. So basically, Papua New Guinea and COVAX. So Papua New Guinea is a participating member of the COVAX facility, where it's a platform that addresses the pandemic, global pandemic, and addressing it as a collective effort globally to make sure that the COVAX facility is that platform to make sure that every countries around the world have equal access and opportunity to this COVID vaccine. So that's basically where Papua New Guinea is now a member of that COVAX facility. So as such, PNG is eligible to receive vaccine against the COVID-19. So all the due process, the regulatory process has been passed through. It's not like we just woke up from sleep and we've said, bring the vaccine in. All the due regulatory process at the highest level has been passed, has been met, and this vaccine is now approved to be safe by the scientific community as well as the government of PNG. That's why this vaccine is now introduced to Papua New Guinea. So as you can see, all these requirements, the Part A, the Part B, all these submitted and signed by responsible heads and people in the government departments as well as the public solicitor's office. So all these ones has been met and the emergency use authorization has been granted by the health minister for this vaccine. So this process is met. Okay, now the progress so far on the deployment process. So it's from the national level. This is the timeline that we have. Obviously, we are now in March. So on March 23rd, okay, so we all have heard, I guess, from the government of Australia, 8,000 vaccine of AstraZeneca has been donated to Papua New Guinea and arrived on March 23rd. So this is where we are. So on the 29th of March, this vaccination will be rolled out in NCD only for all the health workers in National Capital District. As currently we can see that 50% of the cases in PNG are reported to be coming from NCD, and the workforce is now bent out and a lot of our health workers are being affected. So to address that and to keep the system going, we address it here in NCD with the 8,000 vaccine donated from the Australian government. So, and then in April, the highlight there, we're expecting the AstraZeneca vaccine, the first dose of the first supply, about 288,000 will be arriving in the first shipment in mid-April. And then in mid-May, the vaccination will start across the country. So it's very intense, the planning process and communication with provinces, training them, all these things are happening right now at the national level. So this is the timeline. We don't know if it may change. Okay, next. So that's basically the structure here in the National Department of Health, the National Technical Working Group. So this is the group that is now
We've just lost. Oh, you're back
in
now.
the preparation for the rollout. Stephanie, are you able to?
Yes, we have you back. We lost you for a moment, but we can hear you now. Thanks, Martha.
Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the procurement plan. Again, we have vaccines coming from the right, the Right now, the 1,000 will be Serum Institute of India, 588,000 doses. So we'll get a first shipment of 288, and then of course 8,000 is coming from AstraZeneca Oxford donation from Australian government, and Indian government has also come on board with a further donation of 70,000 doses. Next slide, please. And yes, that's the distribution 3,000 doses. Half in the first arrival in mid to late April, and the next in mid-May to June. So I think that's in the next slide. No. Yeah. So wireless vaccine, the 288,000. Stephanie, go back to the COVAX vaccine distribution plan. COVAX vaccine distribution plan. Yeah. So this 288,400 doses will be for the 3% of the total 20% population for the first rollout of the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine this year. So for the 288,000, when I say the first group of health workers, we are looking at all the health workers plus all the support staff within the health system in PNG and the frontline workers at the borders, the isolation and quarantine facilities, the defense force, the police, the military, the CIS officers, the security guards, the grounds, the cooks at the hospitals, the cleaners, hygiene workers, and of course, all the category of health workers will be covered in the first 288,000 doses. Basically the distribution plan, right? In every the provinces to get the data. It's unlike the normal vaccine with children where we have the data fixed and we can get that in the National Health Information System. This is for like a specific group of people that we don't always have those numbers. So, we are trying to count the cleaners, the guards, and all this one. So it's very, active with the officers here trying to get these numbers like now, before the vaccines arrive. Okay, next. And yes, the AstraZeneca vaccine, I think those are the countries that are, rolling out these vaccines. And of course, now we have more than 50 million people already vaccinated with this vaccine. So the data and the numbers are changing daily, but the idea behind this is, it has been used in other countries around the world, and there is very minimal reactions and side effects, and it is proven to be safe. That's the idea behind all this data. So I think these data, they are now, it has changed to over 50 million people around the world. So the vaccine for PNG is recommended for persons age 18 years and above only. It will not be given to anybody below 18 years. So the recommended schedule is 2 doses, given IMI of 8 to 12 weeks interval. So the cold chain supply management in the country is, we have adequate supply and it's managed by UNICEF at the moment. Next. Yeah, so again, AEFI, I think a lot of people are having questions about AEFI, so that's adverse events following immunization. Yes, this is the table is showing like expected, events following immunization, very common, pain, tender, and all this one, and very rare. We may have an anaphylactic reaction and all that, but it's very rare. So again, the basic things are pain, tenderness, warmth, swelling, all these ones. So I think next slide. Yeah, so what are we doing in terms of AFI in PNG? There's a national committee endorsed by Health Secretary already 2 years ago, which has been existing for the routine immunization. However, for this one, now because the target population or the beneficiaries will be adults, we are now including two physicians, adult physicians in Papua New Guinea to be included in this committee to address AEF at the national level, and TORs and everything else is now being underway. So by end of next week, the committee should be full functioning to address AFI, and we are replicating this to all the provinces. So there'll be provincial AEFI committee also, and a training will be given, and AEFI kits will be distributed to all facilities in the country. Next. Okay, so that's the Stephanie, if you can keep entering, I think there are some more arrows to be showing. Yeah, keep. Thank you. So that is the tentative training plan. So right today is the 26th of March, and we are completing this orientation meeting on microplanning. So again, provinces need to be supported. So these microplans have already been given out to all provinces 2 weeks ago, and on the 30th of March, all microplans should be in. And as per the schedule you see, we will go by all these until we come to the vaccination date, which is tentatively planned for mid-May. So training at different levels until we go right to the health facility training, maybe a week or two before the actual implementation or rollout of the vaccines. So this is the plan. It's very tight, like every week we something to do, and every day. Yeah, so basically it's yes, so I think I've covered all those ones already. So it's like, and all this, the delivery will be arriving. Its province must have, the numbers and all these frontline health workers and all these processes ongoing. Next. Yeah, so operational. For the initial one, yeah, that's all. And then all this social data and community perception, getting messages down to the population is very key, and all the partners are coming together. Every day we are doing all these things and trying to develop key messages for the public and designing IECs and training materials for the health workers, and all these ones is now in progress. Next. Yeah, I think that's basically that. If any questions, then I can answer later on, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha. That was excellent. Thank you both very much. We're going to shift into answering some of the questions that people submitted through the online survey that was sent out last week. Thank you to everyone who submitted really, just really thoughtful, really excellent questions that help us to understand the particular areas that you'd like more clarity on. So we're hoping that we can address those for you today. So we'll be having in this panel now Martha and David, and also Dr. Tony Merritt. He's a public health physician here at Hunt New England Health, also a faculty member of FETPNG and the advanced program, so very familiar to many of you. So thank you, Tony, for joining us as well. Dave, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on as well, if possible. And I might actually start with Martha, just because I'm worried, as you said, Martha, that your data might run out. So I just wanted to ask a question for you on the end there. So it looks like the plan is to start vaccination around mid-May. And you had a slide at the end of community engagement. But what do you think for our healthcare workers and our field EPIs, what can they be doing in their communities to help increase awareness of the vaccine and the likelihood that people will accept the vaccine?
Yes, Stephanie, thank you. For the, this is very important. Like, then we want everybody's, input and everybody's contribution wherever you are, in terms of, bringing the message and delivering the vaccine and make it a success. We want to see, reduction in the number of morbidity as well as mortality. So, like, if you are anywhere where you can assist, like in terms of the 50 graduates, I'm having a phone call coming in at the same time. Yeah, for the FET graduates and our health workers there.
Oh, might have lost Martha to a competing
Like
phone call.
Provincial EOC, provincial provinces. So if we have provinces, please get hooked up with it, and we have those, and we will be using this through education in regards to COVID-19 is UNICEF, and they are developing all these IC materials, providing information around the vaccine. So we encourage all FET graduates in the provinces to connect to the EOCs and incident managers in the province to take part in rolling out this COVID-19 vaccine.
Thank you, Martha. And are there sort of mechanisms at a community level that people can engage with as well? So is it common maybe for church leaders to be involved in community health initiatives or other community leaders?
Yes, we have spoken to the provinces, and I think most of the provinces are now engaging church pastors. And we have these VHV, village health volunteers, also existing in the provinces, and they are being trained. And those are like living within the community, among the people, and they are respected, and they are being selected by the community members themselves. So those are the, networks existing on the ground. I think Eastern Highlands provinces has embarked on engagement of pastors, and they are now currently training a very large number of church pastors, and it's like a big network that is now going out to all the communities and villages. So these are existing, networks that we can tap into.
Oh, that's fantastic news, Martha. Thank you. I'd love to hear more about that on a bit later, perhaps. I just realized I have a lot of questions here, but I think that's a really important topic, and maybe we could do another session together to learn about how we can be engaging more in communities on this. Thank you, Martha. Tony, I was wondering, so we're at a community level, the people that we have here on the phone, these are frontline. I guess the key question that came through from people, and I know Dave explained this, but is the vaccine safe?
Look, it really is safe. So it's been through a really thorough regulatory approval process. We know the Australian process really well, but we can look around the world and see it's being used in over 50 countries now. So it's been through those regulatory approval processes. And in Australia, because we had the luxurious position of low levels of community transmission, it's the absolutely usual regulatory process. You may have heard about emergency use approvals in other countries, but in Australia and in a collection of other countries, it's been the routine regulatory approval process, which sets very demanding levels of prior information about the vaccine being both safe and effective. So it's been through that initial process. That's on the basis of the first trials. And then, as we've heard from Martha, the vaccine's now being used in tens and tens of millions of people with really effective surveillance, looking out for any signals from all of those people who've been vaccinated. It's exactly the situation that's happening in Australia, but across all those European countries as well. And so we now have the benefit before vaccination even starts in PNG of being able to reflect on the experience of 50 million people. So enormous levels of reassurance. We've heard Martha tell us that side effects are common, and that's really important. That's a really important message. They're common, but they're mild and they're brief, as you heard David outline. So when any of us front up for our vaccination, it's very reasonable that we expect that we may well have a sore arm, may well feel tired, lethargic, even have a headache for a day or two, and then that will resolve. So that's common, that's expected. So we know that's what's ahead for people, many people who have the vaccine. But severe reactions are really rare, and we've now got the confidence of those very large numbers of people who've been studied. We know, for example, severe allergic reaction can occur, but with the AstraZeneca vaccine, it's around about 1 in a million doses, and can be, that's a kind of level that's expected with other vaccinations that we're used to giving, and where vaccine providers are great at being prepared for that and responding to it appropriately. So we really can be very confident that we now have the benefit of all that experience, both the trials and everything that's happened since.
Thank you, Tony. Dave, I'm just wondering, while I ask a follow-up question, if you wouldn't mind please bringing up the slide that you had on adverse effects. It had the pictorials on there, because I think that might be quite helpful. Tony, I was wondering if you could just speak to the blood clot events that we were hearing about out of Europe. Is that something that people were interested in? Is that something that we expect? Is it unusual?
Look, it's an important story, and it lets us know that system I just talked about is really working carefully, and that is, as the vaccine is rolled out and as tens of millions of people get it, questions will be very reasonably raised. Is there an issue with, in this case, it was blood clots? And so the answers come back very clearly from Europe and from Australia's regulator and elsewhere, that the AstraZeneca vaccine does not increase the overall level of blood clots. So blood clots of some sort are common. So if you have 10 million people vaccinated, some are going to have blood clots. 10 million people not vaccinated, some of them are going to have blood clots. And overall, we can be confident that the AstraZeneca vaccine does not increase the level of blood clots. So you will likely have heard of a number of European countries who put their vaccine rollout on hold for a number of days while they look carefully at this question, and those countries have restarted using AstraZeneca, having been reassured. Now, there is a very, very small group of people for whom the question is still being explored, whether there is any association with a number of really very rare types of blood clot. So a clot in one of the veins inside the head, and types of clots associated with the drug heparin, so heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. So these are incredibly rare conditions. We're still exploring those, but the clear message overall is we can be very confident that AstraZeneca vaccine does not increase the risk of blood clots, and can be safely used. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks, Dave, for bringing that up. Oh, might have frozen on Dave.
Do you want me to speak to it, Steph?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief overview, that would be great,
Yes.
please, Dave.
So look, just to take people through the slide, the colours indicate the severity of the symptoms. So if it's yellow, it's just mild. If it's a little bit darker or pink, it's moderate. Severe is red, and requiring hospitalization is that dark red. And you'll see there were no side effects. This is the local side effects after the first dose. The top row are people between 18 and 55. The next row is 56 to 69. and then people over 70 years of age. This is the trial data, and you'll see the main symptom in all groups was pain and tenderness, a little bit of warmth at the injection site, and you'll also see, it's interestingly enough, it's younger people who complained most about these symptoms. The older you get, the less frequent they were. Then the second dose, so that's the first dose. The interesting thing with AstraZeneca is that the second dose, there we go, the second dose is much lower. Again, they're almost always in the mild category. There are a few more in the younger age group than in the older age groups, but in all of the age groups, it's much less. If we go on to systemic symptoms, this is the flu-like symptoms I was talking to you about. You'll see that, yes, quite a few people talk about fatigue in the day or two after the vaccine, and particularly again in the younger age group under 55. You can see it's much less in the older age groups. A small number of people get fever on the first day or the second day, but you can see it disappears after that. And a few people, as Tony mentioned, actually get a headache, more again in the young people than in older people. So these are flu-like illness, muscle aches and pains, but nothing that required hospitalization. And if we go on to the next group, which is the second dose and systemic effects, you can see much milder. So even though there are occasionally a few fatigue, there were no fevers in any of the age groups. And so the symptoms are, as Tony described, what we would normally expect after an intramuscular vaccination. And a lot of the response is really a sign that our immune system is either working locally with the little cells that we call antigen presenting cells, or that our immune system centrally is being kicked into action as well. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, Dave. I just want to shift. I know that Dave covered this a bit in the presentation, but just to get a really clear answer on this one, Tony, I was wondering if you could just speak to the idea that the vaccine was tried in lots of different countries. How do we know that it will also be effective for people in PNG?
Yeah, it's a really important question, isn't it? And I guess we can draw very confidently on the scale of the trials that were conducted before it was indeed regulated and registered. So as David showed that map with countries in both Africa and South America, including in Europe, and it's being rolled out in over 50 countries, and we're starting to see real world evidence of effectiveness in those countries as well. So it has been used broadly across a very broad range of groups, and there are no signals at all that it's not working in any particular subgroups. I think we can have very high level of confidence that it'll be an effective vaccine in PNG as well, and it'll be great to start seeing the impacts in PNG, which will reinforce that.
Thanks, Tony. I might just have one last question for Dave before we open it up to the group. Dave, you explained some of the different components in the vaccine in your presentation, and you explained about the spike proteins. One of the things that people are commonly hearing is that there's some kind of microchip or something like this. We're hearing about the 666, these kinds of things that might enable people to be traced, that might be somehow connected with 5G and things like this. I was wondering if you could just clarify for us your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, look, it's those. What we know is that what's happening is a very simple virus. And this is not sophisticated. A cold virus is not a sophisticated virus. It's just being used to transport that little bit of genetic code, which is protein. So for things to be transmitting signals, you would need different metals involved. This is just a simple protein, and it's broken down very, very quickly. So if you go searching for it afterwards, you won't find it. The body's normal reactions, normal response will actually destroy it. But it's there long enough to actually create little spikes that prime the immune system. So I certainly am fully confident that the only signals that it's giving are within our own body, signaling to our immune system to actually get it prepared to fight the virus when we encounter the virus.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. I'd like to open it up to see if there's any other questions. I have one here in the chat. Thank you to Pilly. Should people who have previously tested for COVID-19 also get the vaccine? So maybe they've had it at some point in the last year. Should they also be getting vaccinated when it comes out?
So I can probably answer that one. We're seeing some very interesting data coming out just actually in the last few weeks. We know that the COVID infection itself is horrible, and in some people it's lethal. But what we're seeing in particularly younger people is a horrible constellation of ongoing symptoms for months after the infection, what we call long COVID, which is one of the good reasons to get vaccinated and not try and just tackle it when you get infected. So we know the vaccine appears to be highly effective in preventing disease, and therefore to prevent long COVID. The problem with that, well, what we've seen in the last few weeks is it looks like vaccination after a person has had a confirmed infection actually reduces the chance of long COVID. Now, this is the first papers that we have seen coming out, and they were in preprint, but that is very exciting. It may mean that we can avoid some of that terrible ongoing really unclear thinking that people talk about, some of the terrible pain in the chest that can persist for months and months, including in young people, could probably be prevented by vaccination. Now, we don't give a vaccine when a person has got acute illness. Generally, that acute illness will provide some protection for up to 6 months. So the WHO currently says, have a jab, but maybe wait 6 months before you get the jab. If this data is confirmed, then I would strongly recommend that people should get the jab. So there's really no need. If a person is well and hasn't got a fever, and then there's no reason not to actually jab them. It's not worthwhile doing tests to check antibodies. That's not going to help very much. You don't want to delay it when you're in the middle of a COVID surge. You'd rather give the vaccine.
Thank you, Dave. I've just had a question come in from Joyce in the chat box. Thank you, Joyce. I might direct this to Tony. What does enhanced immune response mean compared to normal natural immunity, or even the traditional way other vaccines develop immunity?
Look, I think we shouldn't be tripped up by that language. The basic process that's going on with the COVID vaccine is exactly the same kind of process that is being used with other vaccines. Some sort of component of the COVID virus, in this case the spike protein, is being presented so that our immune system can develop protections against that with antibodies and the relevant cells. And so that fundamental process is happening with all the other vaccines that we use. The way that we get that spike protein there is a little bit different for the different COVID vaccines, so those strategies may differ, but at the end of the day, the process for actually triggering an effective immune response to protect us again if we're then exposed to COVID again in the future is the same as with other vaccines, and it's really very similar to what would happen if we were exposed to COVID. Just as David was saying, if you have the choice of developing your immunity from a vaccine rather than being exposed to COVID in the wild, you take the vaccine every time. There's the risk with COVID, of course, that some people will have really severe disease and it'll be fatal for some. And we're learning more and more about these kind of longer consequences. So I think at the heart of the question, Joyce, is that the process that's going on is exactly what we'd expect in the way we develop immunity in response to either exposure to a disease or exposure to a vaccine. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, Tony. Tony, I might just ask you this next one as well. A question from our friends in Solomon Islands. Hello, everybody in Solo. For people who have high blood pressure or regular bruising, is the vaccine safe? I might broaden this up to just in general. Are there any people that shouldn't be receiving the vaccine at the moment? I specifically had someone ask if pregnant women can receive the vaccine at the moment.
Yeah, it really is got a great safety profile. There's just a very small group of people whom we say, look, it's not appropriate to be vaccinated with this COVID vaccine. It's in a very small group, and that is severe allergic reaction to exactly this vaccine in the past. So that won't be anybody in PNG at the moment. And it's, when I say severe allergic reaction, that's full anaphylaxis. So meeting those highest level criteria for a really severe allergic reaction. And that's uncommon. Or a similar level of severe allergic reaction, so anaphylaxis, to a component of the vaccine. And again, that's incredibly uncommon. So they're the only two groups in whom there's an absolute recommendation that the vaccine is contraindicated. If people are particularly unwell at the time, then it likely makes sense to defer vaccination. That's kind of standard. Now, with pregnancy, it's not routinely recommended in pregnancy, and that's advice that may change in time as we learn more about the vaccine profile in pregnant populations. The vaccines weren't tested in pregnant people as a routine group in the first trials, and that's completely standard vaccination practice. But there's no indications that this is a vaccine that's going to be dangerous in pregnancy. It's not, David explained earlier, it's a virus that's carrying in the spike protein material essentially, or the code for it. It's not a virus that can reproduce, so it's not a live vaccine in the way that we think about some live vaccines which shouldn't be given in pregnancy. And in those early trials, there were some women who were vaccinated who turned out to be pregnant, and there were no signals indicating any concerns or around safety in the women who were pregnant and were vaccinated nonetheless. So the profile of this vaccine so far looks to be reassuring, and so it becomes, whilst it's not routinely recommended in pregnancy with with everything we have in front of us at the moment, it's a very reasonable risk-benefit decision to make with women. And in the context where there's lots of COVID circulating and the risks to COVID in pregnant women are very significant, both for severe COVID infection and threatening the pregnancy, then it becomes a very reasonable decision for pregnant women to make. So that's a long-winded answer. Whilst it's not routinely recommended, it's a reasonable step for a woman to make on the balance of the benefits that would accrue if there's COVID about, which will certainly be the case in PNG.
Thank you, Tony. I'm just going to ask one final question just to keep us to time here, combining the two that are in the chat, and also this was asked previously as well. Dave, would you mind please explaining about what we know or how much we know about the sort of length of immunity that we can expect from the vaccine? Is this something that we might end up having to get boosters down the track, or what does this look like?
It's a great question because we don't yet have the answer. So we will be gathering, and that's what all of the trial groups, and particularly the AstraZeneca group, are doing, is that they are doing long-term follow-up of the people who are included in the trial to see how long the protection will last. It appears to provide robust protection, very similar to what we've seen with our own immune systems for at least 6 months, but we're gathering data as we go. The other key issue is obviously the thing that has been of concern, and that's the mutations of the virus, or variants of concern, we call it. And so it is likely that we will have to adapt the vaccine and actually to ensure that we protected against the virus. Now, I was of course concerned when there was a surge in PNG that could this be a variant of concern? But it was very reassuring. The Queensland Reference Laboratory has actually looked at the genome, at the way the material, the way the virus is structured, and says that it's not a variant of concern. So from what they've seen, it's not like the South African variant, which can be a challenge with the vaccine. It appears the vaccine will be very effective. But we may have to adapt the vaccine, and a bit like the flu vaccine, we may have to give a booster once every year or once every 2 years. That we're not sure of yet, but we'll be gathering the data. The key thing is to get protected now, and then we'll see that there'll be global monitoring of what's happening with the virus and with mutations, and the vaccines will be adapted to protect us through probably a booster system.
Thank you, Dave. Well, thank you, everyone. I cannot believe that we look to actually be on time, finishing up there, and hopefully we got through most of the key questions that came through. Thank you so much to Martha and Tony and Dave for sharing with us today in this really new and strange time for so many people in public health, navigating so much information and misinformation. So thank you all very much for sharing your time and knowledge with us. And thank you for all of our friends in Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands and potentially elsewhere who've joined in today. We hope this helped to provide some evidence for your decision making for yourselves around what the vaccine looks like for you and your families in Papua New Guinea. So thank you all. We would like to host some other sessions like this in the future to provide an opportunity for you to have access to ask different questions that you may not otherwise quite know how to have answered. So we'll be in touch with that going ahead. I think we were hoping to try to get a bit of a group photo if we could get people's cameras on, but I wonder if this might completely bring the whole Zoom down, but it could be fun to try. Oh, it's nice to see people's faces. Hello, hello. Oh, Martha, your internet held up so well. Good, good. Oh, look, we're there. James, are you able to screenshot as many faces we can get? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It was really nice to connect. We'll probably send out some kind of red cap or something to get an idea on if this was useful, if this is something that people would like to continue doing moving ahead, and some topics that people are interested in. And yeah, we'd be very interested in all of your feedback. So Barry, you're there. I can see your name down the bottom. Can you hear me? I think he's running in and out of meetings.
I don't think he has his microphone connected, Steph, but
Okay.
he has been on, so hopefully he's been able to at least hear.
I hope so. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Very nice to see all of our friends. Stay safe, and we will speak with you all soon. Bye.
Thanks, Steph. All the best, everyone.
Steph.
Thanks.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Steph.
Martha. Thank you, Martha. You're fantastic.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Takut na po Zoom.